Look, hang up the phone or you're going in cuffs.
Sir, my ID is right here. I'm a DOJ official.
Listen, I don't need a reason. Step back now.
I'm not moving, pal. This is public property.
I don't want to lecture. Turn around, hands back.
Fine, go ahead. Explain this to your chief later.
It was a hot, bright afternoon in downtown Chicago. The sun was beating down on the busy streets, and the air smelled heavy with hot pavement and the dark roast coffee drifting out of the corner shops. Elijah Barnes, 58 years old, was a high-ranking official with the Department of Justice. He was walking with a purpose toward the glass doors of a federal office building. His leather briefcase was gripped tightly in his hand, packed with paperwork for a crucial meeting with federal investigators. He had just parked his car in the lot reserved for staff. His dark sedan was spotless, shining in the sunlight, with plates that were perfectly legal and registration that was up to date. "Sir, get away from the vehicle," a loud voice shouted from behind him. Barnes turned around to see two uniformed police officers walking toward him. Their hands were hovering nervously near their guns. Their faces looked tight and on edge. One of them was younger, looking pretty full of himself, squinting at Barnes like he was trying to figure out a riddle. The other officer was older and looked like he was hesitating, not sure if he should jump in or just back up his partner. "I have authorization to be here," Barnes said, keeping his voice calm. He held up his Department of Justice badge. "I'm on official government business and I'm heading inside. Is there an issue?" He spoke with the steady, measured tone of a man who spent his life in courtrooms. The younger cop flicked his eyes toward Barnes's car, then back to his face. "We got a call about suspicious activity in the lot. We need to verify who you are, so step aside right now," he demanded. The command sounded almost ridiculous in the bright afternoon light. Regular people were walking by, pausing to look curiously at the scene. You could hear the rustle of papers in Barnes's bag, the honking of cars, and even some laughter from a street performer down the block. All those normal city sounds felt completely different from the sudden, tense silence that settled between the man and the police. Barnes reached into his bag and pulled out his full credentials, his DOJ ID, his security badge, and a letter proving his assignment for the day. He laid them out clearly on the hood of his car. "I have every right to be here. This is my car. These are my credentials. Why exactly are you stopping me?" His calm attitude seemed to annoy the younger officer, whose jaw clenched tight. "This is a report of a suspicious person," the officer snapped. "Just do what you're told." Barnes's mind started running through legal cases, constitutional rights, and civil rights laws. The Fourth Amendment protects people from unreasonable searches and seizures, yet here he was, about to be detained just because of a vague report, and most likely some built-in prejudice. "I am cooperating under protest," Barnes said firmly. "But let me be crystal clear. Detaining me without reasonable suspicion is against the law." People walking by slowed down. A woman nearby held up her phone and started recording. Her camera caught every move and every word. The officer's frustration was boiling over. He stepped closer, his voice getting louder. "Step aside or you will be detained." Barnes kept his hands where they could be seen, staring straight ahead. The situation had gone way past a simple misunderstanding. You could feel the tension hanging over the parking lot. It wasn't just about this argument. It was a reflection of a system where assumptions often mattered more than actual rights. "You are making a big mistake," Barnes said, his voice quiet but solid as a rock. "I am a senior official with the DOJ. I have ID. There is no reason for this." The officer's eyes went wide, a mix of shock and anger. Around them, the small crowd could feel how serious this was getting. A man with real authority was being treated like a danger just for standing in his own parking space. Can you even imagine being in his shoes at that moment? You work your whole life to uphold the law, and suddenly you're being treated like a criminal in broad daylight. It's honestly frustrating just to think about. The confrontation was balancing on a knife's edge. A tiny misunderstanding had spiraled into something that could ruin careers. Every second was being recorded. Every move was being documented. Barnes stood tall, ready for whatever came next. He knew the law. He knew his rights. But right then, logic didn't seem to matter as much as the officer's pride and procedure. The first act of unfairness had started, and the city streets seemed to hold their breath. Elijah Barnes, 58, had spent almost 40 years working his way through the halls of American justice. Born in Detroit to a schoolteacher and a mail carrier, he learned early on that you have to keep pushing and fighting for what's right. College at Howard University sharpened his mind and helped him understand how the system could be stacked against people. Law school at Georgetown pushed him to be the best, even when professors doubted a young black man from a working-class neighborhood could handle complicated federal laws. Every case he took, every person he defended, showed his dedication to fairness and civil rights. After he graduated, Barnes joined the Department of Justice, starting out in the Civil Rights Division. He investigated bad police behavior, prosecuted hate crimes, and handled tricky cases about racial discrimination. Over the years, he became famous not just for being a great lawyer, but for never giving up. So many people and neighborhoods owed their safety and dignity to his hard work. He wrote reports that changed how police departments worked, spoke in front of Congress, and gave advice on national plans to stop systemic bias. To the people he worked with, he was a mentor. To the public, he was a quiet hero, enforcing justice. But today, the very system he served was treating him like he didn't belong. On the flip side, the officers facing him had their own complicated stories, though they weren't as impressive. Officer Kyle Miller, 34, had been a cop for 10 years. His record was a mix of awards and minor complaints. But if you looked closer, you'd see a pattern. He stopped black men a lot, based on vague suspicions. He tended to make things worse instead of calming them down, and he sometimes ignored the rules. His partner, Officer Jim Reynolds, 41, had been around longer. His co-workers respected him for working hard, but reports said he was too rigid and followed authority blindly without using his own judgment. Both men came from a system that often rewarded following the steps over using common sense and assumptions over facts. Their pasts, whether they realized it or not, led them to this moment in the parking lot. Miller was used to taking charge and seeing himself as the protector of order. Reynolds usually waited until things went wrong, preferring not to step in too early. Both had been in spots where not acting was seen as being weak, which just encouraged them to be aggressive. The police culture, history, and what the community expected all shaped how they acted today. Stopping and challenging a man just because he was black and standing near a sensitive building. Barnes's ID should have been enough to clear things up instantly, but the system's problems messed up the officer's choices. The reports of a suspicious person from the building staff had been unclear. Miller had learned to act first and ask questions later. Reynolds was stuck between following protocol and realizing they might be wrong, so he hesitated. All these things set the stage for a conflict that felt routine to the cops, but was shocking for Barnes. This backstory explains why this wasn't just a simple mistake. Elijah Barnes's lifetime of service, knowledge, and legal power crashed into procedural biases and deep-seated habits of judgment. The huge gap in experience, combined with the heavy history of race and policing, created a situation ready to explode. It was a clash of two different worlds, one shaped by decades of fighting for fairness, the other trained to see suspicion before truth and to act before checking. The tension in the parking lot got thicker. Barnes's credentials were laid out plain as day on the hood of his sedan. But Officer Miller refused to admit they were real. Reynolds hovered nearby, his eyes darting between the ID cards and Barnes's calm face. He didn't know whether to jump in or just let Miller run the show. People walking by slowed down, sensing something wasn't right, and some started secretly filming with their phones. The city noise, the traffic, the laughter from the cafes faded away, replaced by the heavy silence around the standoff. Barnes raised his hands a little, showing he was listening but not giving up. "Please, officers, there is no crime happening here. I am here for an official DOJ meeting. You can check this right now. I am cooperating," he said, his voice steady but strong. Miller's face got harder. "We got a report. You match the description of a suspicious person. We need to make sure everything is right." A small crowd started to form, drawn by the weird sight of two uniformed cops hassling a well-dressed man in broad daylight. Phones went up, whispers spread through the group, and the first video clips started hitting social media. Barnes noticed the cameras and gave a tiny nod to the people filming. The crowd watching made the stakes higher. Every person walking by was a witness to what was happening. The officer's body language showed they were stressed. Miller took a half-step closer, his hand brushing his holster. Reynolds's shoulders were stiff, showing he was torn between being unsure and following the rules. Their choices weren't coming from clear evidence, but from their past experiences and hidden biases. Miller's past run-ins with suspicious black guys in the city had trained him to act fast, often too fast. Reynolds knew his partner was like this, but stayed quiet because of the chain of command and fear of looking weak. Barnes's mind ran through all the possible endings. Every move, every word was calculated to protect his rights without making things worse. He knew how important it was to be seen, to have witnesses, and to have a record of it. "I am complying under protest. Detaining me without reasonable suspicion is unlawful. You may verify my credentials with DOJ headquarters," Barnes stated calmly, choosing his words carefully. The crowd reacted. A woman at a hot dog cart whispered to her friend, "That guy isn't doing anything wrong." A teenager filming murmured, "This is crazy." The whispers got louder. Eyes were watching, and the officers felt the pressure building. But Miller kept pushing, his need to be in charge overpowering his common sense. "Step aside, or you will be detained," he repeated, his voice sounding frustrated. The standoff had turned from a little mix-up into a public show. Every person walking by, every recording, every whispered comment was part of an invisible jury. Barnes's professional calm and the officer's stubborn rule-following highlighted a bigger problem in the system, one shaped by history, rank, and deep-rooted bias. This escalation, watched and recorded by the growing crowd, was going to be crucial. It wasn't just Barnes against Miller anymore. It was the law, what people saw, and society's biases crashing into each other out in the open. Every word and move had consequences now, setting up the injustice that was about to define the whole day. It really breaks your heart to see it, doesn't it? The way pride can just completely blind someone to the truth standing right in front of them. The metal handcuffs clicked tight around Elijah Barnes's wrists. They felt cold against his skin, pressing uncomfortably, but not hard enough to make him fight back. He let out a slow breath, keeping his body relaxed, knowing that every single move was being watched by the crowd that had gathered. People stopped to watch. Some were filming, some were whispering, while the background noise of traffic and the smell of coffee filled the tense air. Every step toward the police car felt like it was happening in slow motion, showing just how crazy this situation was. A senior DOJ official was being arrested for nothing more than standing near his own workplace. Inside the patrol car, the vinyl seats smelled like cleaning chemicals, stiff and hard. Barnes sat up straight, his hands visible on his lap. Officer Miller drove with a stiff back, looking in the mirror at Barnes with a mix of uncertainty and a need to be right. Reynolds stayed quiet, shifting in his seat now and then, but not saying anything to his partner. The city streets blurred by, but Barnes's mind was sharp. He was making a list of every detail, traffic patterns, the time, conversations, things he would write down later for legal reports. The silence in the car was heavy. Barnes's thoughts were moving fast, going through legal precedents and potential lawsuits, Fourth Amendment rights, equal protection, racial profiling. It all became real in the simple act of being handcuffed and driven away. Miller fidgeted with the radio, scared to speak, maybe realizing that his actions had crossed a line he couldn't uncross. The heavy quiet inside the car was a huge contrast to the chaos back at the parking lot, emphasizing how wrong this all was. Outside, the crowd was breaking up, but the recordings lived on. People who had filmed it were already uploading clips to the internet. Each video was a silent witness. The embarrassment of the stop was made worse by knowing that every gesture, every order from Miller, and every calm reaction from Barnes was being documented in real time. Barnes stayed cool, projecting a calm power even while he planned his next move. He thought about the legal fallout, noting the witnesses and the video proof. You could feel the officers getting unsure. A slow realization was creeping in, that this wasn't a normal arrest. The longer the ride went on, the more obvious the power imbalance became. Barnes's knowledge and credentials stood in stark contrast to the officers' reliance on assumptions and bias. By the time the squad car got to the station, the feeling of injustice was even stronger. Barnes's calm face hid the determination building inside him. He wasn't just planning how to defend his rights right now, he was planning how to make sure they were held accountable later. The injustice wasn't just the cuffs or the ride. It was the system failing, treating authority and experience as nothing compared to prejudice. The slow-motion feeling of the event, stretched out by tension, set the stage for the showdown that was about to happen inside the precinct. Inside the police station, the vibe changed instantly. The bright fluorescent lights cast long shadows over the processing area, making the moment feel heavy. Barnes sat calmly on a holding chair, wrists still cuffed, while Officer Miller handed his ID and papers to the desk sergeant. The room smelled like disinfectant and old paper. You could hear the low hum of people working and the occasional beep of a computer. Sergeant Davis, a veteran with 25 years on the job who knew how to handle tough cases, walked over after looking at the credentials. He paused, his eyes narrowing as he scanned Barnes's DOJ ID. "Sir, can you confirm your assignment for today?" he asked, his voice steady but serious. Barnes answered clearly, stating his job title, his duties, and the meeting he was supposed to be in. The letterhead, the seals, and the holograms on his ID left no doubt. They were real. Miller's face went white. He looked at Reynolds, and a flicker of panic crossed his face. The realization hit them like a truck. They had detained a senior federal official for no reason. "You're a DOJ official?" Miller stammered, disbelief and fear mixing in his voice. Barnes nodded, keeping his face calm but firm. The room seemed to freeze. Every witness, every cop felt the weight of what had just happened. The procedural mistake was huge, made worse by who Barnes was and how unfair the whole thing was. Sergeant Davis walked straight to the desk and called DOJ headquarters. Within minutes, the identity was confirmed. The credentials were undeniably legitimate. The mood in the room shifted completely. Miller's hands were shaking a little. The authority he had thrown around moments ago felt empty and useless now. The air was thick with embarrassment and fear, and the understanding that their actions were going to have immediate consequences. Barnes stayed seated and calm, but his mind was already mapping out the steps for accountability. The plot twist had changed everything. A senior DOJ official arrested for nothing other than assumption and bias was now at the center of a police disaster. The officers, realizing how badly they messed up, were speechless. Their initial confidence melted into fear. The revelation was more than just personal. It was about the system. It showed the danger of acting on assumptions without checking facts, the consequences of overstepping, and the reality of bias in policing. Barnes's professional attitude stood out against the officer's obvious discomfort, turning the moment into a personal win and a public lesson on accountability. You almost have to feel second-hand embarrassment for them at that point. Almost. But mostly you just feel a sense of relief that the truth is finally forcing its way into the room. Every move, every checked ID card, every phone call to headquarters proved the undeniable truth. The injustice had been real. But now, transparency was exposing it, oozing. This moment was the turning point. The arrest, the embarrassment, the assumptions, all of it was laid bare. Barnes's identity and power had been confirmed, and the officers were staring their mistake right in the face. The truth was out, setting the stage for the legal and ethical reckoning that was coming next. Elijah Barnes walked out of the precinct with a quiet strength. The cuffs were off, his credentials were back in his pocket, but his focus was sharper than ever. Within hours, he had called his legal team and filed an official complaint with Internal Affairs, demanding full accountability for the illegal detention. The small crowd that had seen the event kept posting videos online. Clips showing Barnes calmly standing up for his rights went viral within a day, getting millions of views and making people furious. The legal process moved fast. Barnes's lawyers gathered body camera footage, security tapes, and witness statements. The complaint listed violations of the Fourth Amendment, false imprisonment, racial profiling, and abuse of power. Social media blew the story up, grabbing the attention of civil rights groups, reporters, and legal experts. Public pressure grew as the story spread across the news, highlighting the dangers of hidden bias and unchecked assumptions in law enforcement. Internal investigations found deep problems within the police department. Officer Miller's past record, which had been ignored before, was put under a microscope. They found multiple complaints over the years involving stops of black individuals, showing a pattern of discriminatory behavior. Officer Reynolds, even though he didn't start the stops, was also in trouble for not stepping in and following the rules. The department had to face a serious reality check, with leadership admitting they had lapsed on procedures and supervision. The consequences for the officers came quick. Miller was fired for cause, citing multiple violations including unlawful detention and violating constitutional rights. Reynolds was disciplined, reassigned, and forced to undergo retraining. Both were banned from certain duties while things were reviewed. The city's reputation was on the line, and officials moved to settle with Barnes, knowing they legally and ethically lost. The settlement was big. While they didn't say the exact amount, sources said it was enough to show they were serious about stopping this from happening again. Barnes was committed to changing the system. He donated his settlement money to civil rights groups and programs that push for police reform. The Department of Justice launched a wider review of local police practices, looking at bias training, body cameras, and oversight rules. The public reaction proved that accountability matters. Millions watched the videos, talked about it online, and signed petitions for better civil rights protection. Law journals and legal experts broke down the case, showing how important it is to stand up for your rights, even when the system is against you. Barnes's calm response became a lesson for everyone. One person's knowledge and persistence could shine a light on a flawed system and force real change. In the end, justice was served not just through the money or the firings, but through bigger changes in the institution. Officer Miller's career was over. Officer Reynolds's actions were watched closely, and the department made new rules to stop future abuses. The story served as a warning and a guide, proving that sticking to the law and fighting back can actually beat systemic injustice. The aftermath of this incident gave us a huge opportunity to look at the legal and social lessons from Barnes's experience. From a legal view, the officer's actions were clear violations of the Fourth Amendment, which protects us from unreasonable searches and seizures. Detaining someone without a good reason, especially when they clearly identify themselves as a federal official, is a direct violation of rights. Also, racial profiling made the violation even worse, bringing up the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. These laws aren't just ideas on paper. They are real protections meant to keep every citizen safe, no matter their job or status. From a psychological and social view, this case showed how hidden biases and assumptions can control behavior. The officer's choices weren't based on facts, but on stereotypes, past habits, and a fear of looking weak in front of others. These biases, which are often unconscious, show why police need constant training. Recognizing when you are acting on an assumption instead of a fact is crucial to prevent harm and keep the legal system honest. Barnes's experience acts as a guide for how to stand up for your rights while staying safe. People should notice how important it is to stay calm, record the interaction, and clearly state your legal rights without getting aggressive. Video evidence, witnesses, and knowing your rights can turn a bad situation into a chance for accountability. Also, Barnes's approach, complying while protesting and staying professional, shows that being smart within the law can protect your safety and help get justice later. This case also teaches us a civic lesson. Accountability is bigger than just one event. Reporting bad behavior, working with civil rights groups, and supporting reform makes sure the lessons from one stop reach everyone. Barnes's decision to donate his settlement to charity shows a commitment to justice that is bigger than just getting paid back. It proves that changing society takes individual bravery and group action. Ultimately, the story of Elijah Barnes highlights two truths. Even people with power and knowledge can be victims of bias. But the system can work when rights are asserted, evidence is kept, and accountability is demanded. It is a reminder to all citizens and police that we have to be vigilant, know the law, and have moral courage to get justice. We must remember that dignity is an inherent right, not a privilege granted by authority. When we judge others based on their appearance or the color of their skin rather than their actions, we are not revealing their worth, but rather the limitations of our own character. True justice begins when we see the humanity in one another before we see a threat. Let this story be a reminder that protecting the dignity of one person is actually the only way to protect the dignity of us all.